All right. So with that, John or Josh, I don't know which I'm turning it over to, if John wanted to do an introduction or if Josh just wants to go ahead and take it over.
I don't think Josh needs anybody to introduce him, but I'm happy to, and we're very happy to be partnered with you again, Victor and Shanika. So yeah, it's we're honored to be with you tonight, and that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Thanks, everyone. So can everybody see the presentation? Just because I'm using Keynote, which is different than PowerPoint, I want to make sure everything's good. Everybody okay?
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so we talked a little bit about this in the introduction. I sent you guys out, so thank you for having us on, having us. We're just excited to be part of this group and to do what we can. And when John reached out and said, "Would you like to?" I was like, "Yes." I don't even know what you're about to ask, but we'll do anything. And so we started talking through with Victor and Shanika about where do we want to go with this? And one of the things that we do as a company is provide Agile consulting to a lot of companies around the United States. And we thought, you know what, why don't we just take that? Let's take some of our DevOps experience, and you'll get to meet Breon next month. And then some additional folks, Brenda and Margaret, you'll meet them in November. And let's do an Agile series, and let's start with this. Let's start with how agility is changing the role of a project manager. And here's the secret. That's where I came from. So I'm that project manager that Agile changed, that agility changed. And I started this series a couple years ago, and it's called The Non-Expert's Thoughts. And people ask, well, why do you say that? Why do you say non-expert? And I told them, I said, because I feel like when we start getting into calling ourselves experts around something, and this is just me, that we put ourselves on a pedestal. And you know what? I'm still learning every day how to change and to become more flexible, more able to consume change in my life and in work, to the point where I sort of call myself a recovering project manager. And I don't mean that negatively or disparagingly against anyone who is in that role. There are people that are in that role, then there's people who that's who they are. That's who I was. And so I love this series, and I lay it out there because I really want you guys to know that I'm just going to give you my thoughts. I'm just going to give you some ideas. And hopefully I won't call your bluff, Victor. I won't go an hour and 45 minutes. We'll try to be quick, but I asked John, I can get windy. So forgive me for that. But a little bit about, just really quick, just as an intro. I'm actually from Michigan. I was born there and spent my early years in the cold north. Moved to Georgia in my teen years. So it's quite a bit of a culture shock moving from Michigan to Georgia. But loved it, graduated from high school here. And then went to college in Lakeland, Florida, and completed my master's in divinity in Columbus. So that's a little bit about my education, but I got into IT really young. I got into IT when I was in junior high and high school, actually, and helped pull cable in my high school back in the late 80s, early 90s, and I just fell in love with it. And so my first job really was a tech trainer for a local school system at age 19. And so we won't say how long ago that was. It was a long time ago. But from there, I moved from networking systems into project management in the late 90s. And it really was just a natural thing for me because, as I'll share a little bit later, that's just my personality. Everything had a plan. Everything still does sort of have a plan. But I moved into that because I was working for a local hospital and realized that it was really hard to bring entire hospitals onto a wide area network from the back of a napkin. Really needed to have something deeper than that. And so fell into project management, but then moved really rapidly into software and then into Agile in 2005. And I've been with Matrix since 2015, and just a little bit more. I've been married for 22 years and have 3 kiddos. One is a junior in college. That's hard to say. And then I have a junior in high school and an 8th grader. And then in the side, I attempt to do a couple things, but this is a little bit about me. So let's just move on. So when we start talking about this whole expert thing, stop telling people what to do. This is what I tell myself every day, in passing myself off as an expert. Share my life, my experiences and scars, what I've learned. No one wants to know what I know. They want to know what I've lived. And so this whole presentation is really about that. So it's a little bit personal, but I really want you guys to, I'm going to attempt to take breaths in here. And I really want you guys to push in and say, well, why did that happen? Why did you do that? Why does that mean anything to me? So as we go through, please feel free to call things out. And I'm going to open up the chat window here too, so that I have that off to the side, so that I can interact with you guys that way too. So I've broken this up into 2 sections. The first is a little bit about what I call my waterfall life. And then we're going to talk a little bit about agile equaling change. So I'm going to try to spend not a lot of time here and more time on the agile equals change piece, to sort of give you guys, where is this taking us? What is agility really doing? But I want to set a stage first. And I want to set that stage by really talking about where I've come from, and maybe it relates to where you guys are or where you're trying to move away from. So just wanted to throw that out there. So number 1, if we start with plan, right? Everybody knows that's where we start. We always start with the big plan. I always had a plan for my life. When I was, not kidding, 10 years old, this is so sad. When I was 10 years old, I had a 15-year-old, 20-year-old, 25-year-old, and 30-year-old plan for my life. And it was sad. 5 years. I wanted everything to happen at 5 years. When I was 15, I wanted to buy a car. And that car was a Mustang GT convertible, red with a white interior. That was very important to me. Details are important to me. But I wanted to buy a car. And at 20, I wanted to finish college. I wanted to start my job. I wanted to get married because, I had all control over that, right, by myself, is to be able to make that one happen. But I wanted to get married, and honestly, I wanted to buy another car. Now, I'm not talking about swapping a car out. I'm talking about buying another car. I wanted a green Ford Bronco, Eddie Bauer edition. Come on now. Y'all remember those. Y'all remember this was the green one with the tan bottom. It was something. So, but I wanted that. They just released. I'm like, I gotta have one of those. And then at 25, I was gonna buy a house. I was gonna have our first child. Not me, but my wife. We're gonna have our first child, and I was, gonna buy another car. I didn't know what it was, but I was gonna buy another car. And then at 30, we were going to have our second and final child, 5 years apart, like clockwork, right? So that's what we do. And I was going to build a cabin, and I was going to buy another car. I don't know if you guys can see a pattern here emerging, sort of like cars, sort of still do. However, there's a guy in our office, in the North Carolina office, and some of you may know I'm talking about if you've joined from Matrix in Raleigh-Durham, who's much bigger car fan than I am. I don't know how many he has, but anyway. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. You can either answer in the chat, and I'm going to wait. How many of those things, those plans did I achieve? How many do you think? Yell it out, put it in the chat, whatever you think. Come on. How many do you think? Seriously. Okay, 2, 1, all of them, all of them. But that, if I got all of them, that would actually contradict what I'm going to be talking about, wouldn't it? Ooh. So 5, 3, Okay. 1. Only one of those things did I really, white walls are regular. They're regular. It's probably going to be like the BBC wheels. BBC, wow. BBS wheels. You know, the back in the day we had the two-tone wheels with gold and they call them fire and ice wheels. You guys, oh, I'm going too deep, aren't I? No. Anyway, so 1, that was it. Actually, we had our first daughter when I was 25. So, but that's the only one. I didn't get married when I was 20. I didn't get the Mustang. I actually got a 1977 Ford Courier because I was broke. And so I needed something to get back and forth to school with. But the whole point is I had a plan. And a lot of you guys, you go to work, you have your life, you have your plan. And it's a pretty good plan. But you know, what does that do for us? So this whole thing followed me into my adulthood, my career. Like I said, I didn't start as a project manager, but I've always been, I guess you call it an administrator. Just everything was, I loved having charts. I still do. I loved having charts. I loved having a plan in my head. As a matter of fact, when I did get married, we would be coming home from the grocery store and be a couple miles out, and I would go, okay, when we get home, and I would launch into my plan because that's who I was. And my wife literally looked at me one time and she said, "Are you trying to project manager me?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am." And you know, that's just the way I had it. And I had plans at work too. There were things I wanted to do. I was very driven. And I became one of the youngest program managers at a company when I was very young, 22, 23 years old. And but I had this plan in the back of my head. And I had a mentor that one time told me, "Josh, if you want to be a good project manager," and I don't know if any of you guys are project managers, but he said, "You have to think through what is it, if you're going to stand up from your desk and walk into the next room and get a pencil, what does that plan look like? You need to get your tasks down to that level when you're doing a project." And I took that to heart. And that's how I ran things. And I became a project manager and was for several years. And I see some questions here. Yes, Motor City influence coming out. Absolutely. Did you plan for your kids to be evenly spaced 4 years apart? Actually, they're like 2.5 to 3 years apart. And it's a weird thing. The only thing that is pattern driven with my kids, honestly, is that not kidding. They're all born at 39 weeks, 5 days. So they're all born 2 days before their due date. And I had nothing to do with that. So anyway, but the whole idea here was that I wanted to become a good project manager. And I had a plan for everything. Even at work, we had plans, and that's how we did things. And sometimes those plans didn't work out. And that was devastating to me because I wanted the plans. I did a lot of big upfront planning and I wanted them to work out. And it frustrated me when they didn't. And so it was really a struggle for me to get through this. And then we move into requirements. You guys know we go from plan to requirements, and then we go into design and execution and all that. But requirements, I'll tell you just a quick story. I had recently, and you guys know, I just told you, I'm not a detail person, but I respect them and I understand them, and I knew that they were necessary. So I knew that I needed, when I started dealing with requirements, I know I needed to really be detailed, and I needed to force the details, especially when we're doing large projects. And the other important thing to me about projects is they allowed me to almost set a contract between the people asking for the work and the people doing the work. And I had just come off from my first really experience with Scrum, and I had fallen back into some other patterns. And I went to go do some consulting for a company, and I was doing a website redesign. And I'm like, I got to get all these details right. I got to get all the requirements right. We spent weeks going over all the requirements for their redesigned website. It was a e-commerce website. And I knew I had everything captured, right? I had everything locked down. Everything was perfect. And I started my work, and we formed our contract based on the requirements, and we got to UAT, user acceptance testing, and we went in, and they were disappointed, and I was disappointed, and it was very difficult, to the point to where having those really stringent requirements almost burned some bridges, because at the end of the day, people do care about the requirements, but they care about how the products work for them and make them feel. So, here's strike two with my waterfall life. So then we get into implementation, and I'll take another pause here. Yeah, baby voodoo. With such detail, planning your teams can feel micromanaged. Yeah, and here's the thing, Deborah, is I didn't care. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I was driving towards the plan. Everybody knew that the plan existed. When we would go in and I would do projects, and we do large scale implementation projects. One of the largest that I worked with was moving a data center at Cobb County Schools. And we moved thousands of servers and connections. And this was obviously before virtualization. And it didn't matter really what people felt. We had a job to do, and that's what we were going to do. And they knew what the plan was. It was very evident, and that's just how I operated. And in a lot of ways, if I look back, I realized that I ran over some people and to get the plan done. So yeah, good question. Onto implementation, and I'm going to go a little bit quicker through some of these. One of the things that I had a professor tell me, he said, "Josh, that was great, but you shoved like 3 presentations worth of content into one. So thin it out there, buddy." So I'm going to attempt to keep this a little bit more high level through this section. But so as we move into the implementation, I'm already strike two, right? I was already a planner. I'd already seen the requirements, the way that requirements work, fail me. I was now, let's get into implementation. And I was recruited to work for a company in my hometown. We had been living in Asheville, North Carolina, and moved back. And I was going to work for that company. And it was actually started out as a project management gig. And as I joined the engagement, there was going to be a sprinkle of Scrum. So I was like, oh, good, because I loved that. I remember I'd gotten very lightly involved with it when I lived in Asheville, and I really enjoyed it, but I'd set it aside. I used little bits of Kanban in consulting, and I knew what it was, and I liked it, but I not had a chance to really dive in. But this was going to be project management, and then I would get to use this Scrum thing a little bit more. And so when we got in, I did my normal project management approach. I said, guys, tell me what's going on. Let's do a quick audit. I want to look at the plans. I want to look at your requirements. And they pointed to a board and said, there's the plan, buddy. There was a small team of about 9 people. And they said, we come up with ideas. We talk with the pharmacist at this company we're working with, and we're building the largest EHR in retail. That's electronic health record software. And he sends us some things that he'd like to see done, and we do them. And my mind just about blows up, right? I mean, I'm thinking my plans, my requirements, but then I remembered a little bit about Scrum, and I went, okay, we can do that. The team was taking these ideas and making them prototypes before they could even come up with the final solutions. And they were presenting these prototypes as possibilities. And everything was just extremely rapid. And it was to the point where, because the client was using Waterfall for this huge project, and our little company was using versions of Scrum to get work done, that the company that they hired to do the requirements couldn't even keep up. They had to go to a model where they were trying to release requirements every couple weeks to keep up with us. So we were actually forcing them to become more change accepting. But there was a lot of pain in that. There were complaints from the company that we weren't following the requirements, and this other company, and it was just, we found that this implementation, this sort of two-way, this clash of these two worlds was becoming a challenge. And we actually got complaints we're moving too fast. And can you imagine that you're getting complaints that you're getting work done too fast? That just sort of blew my mind. But I knew that I was coming up to a point when I saw these two things clash that I was needing to change. I had this project management background. It was strong, but I was realizing really quickly that I needed to do my own design, build, test. I needed to do my own change and implementation, but I wasn't there yet. So same company, we went to release. Matter of fact, we had released over 119 times to a pre-production environment, and it was being used as a production item. It just wasn't being used by everyone in the company yet. It was being used by a handful of people. And so we were going to final release, but we had a problem. And if some of you have ever been involved with software development, there's a lot of, especially in large enterprise software, there's a lot of connections that you got to make between different software packages. They call them APIs, or they call them WSDLs, or microservices, whatever you want to say. They're just connections between two pieces of software that need to talk. And they weren't ready, but we were. And we were the ones that were driving the majority of this change. So we went to production, we released, and people used it. And we were getting feedback from people to the point to where when we went into this next thing of maintenance, that we were less maintaining the software and fixing bugs, but we were adding new pieces of software. And it was then that it all clicked for me. I had absolutely been in a place where I understood both worlds. But at that point, I started to make this realization that it was time for me to change the way that I approached my work, that I needed to go full in. And I was torn though, because at this point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Until I was offered a Scrum Master and Agile Coach position at another local company. The company I worked for had been taken over by a large equity firm. It was just time for me to move on, and I ended up going to work for this other company, and it was a perfect transition point for me, because I went in again as a sort of an Agile project manager and Scrum Master. And it allowed me to help walk them through taking on agility. And now that I'm into this a little bit, I realize that what I may not have done for you guys is really give an overview of what Agile is, right? Because I see a question here. By waterfall, are you referring to Gantt charts? And so yes, let's do a little intro really quick. If you guys don't mind. So waterfall is a project management method, and it gets its name waterfall because if you look at how it operates as a waterfall. You move from one point to another, and you don't move on from that thing until you're complete. So in other words, I don't go to start working on requirements until I have my project plan set. And my project plan, Lee, to your point, looks like a Gantt chart. It looks like, well, let me back up here. It looks something like that, right? That is a project plan. There are start and stop points. You can see that in this one, there's black bars that refer to the phases, or what we maybe call gates, and then there's tasks inside of that. And so in waterfall, once we don't move on to requirements until we create our project plan. And so what that does for us is if we're spending so much time creating a project plan, then we're hoping, we're begging ourselves that hopefully this thing doesn't change. But if there's one thing that we've learned is that the only constant is change. So even though we spent the first, in some cases, 2-3 months creating a project plan and creating a reason to have this project, it's going to change almost immediately. And so the challenge that we run into with Waterfall is that once I define all my requirements, and that we do that really up front, by the time I get to building that software or implementing that thing, a lot of times those requirements are outdated. And so Waterfall generally does not lend to the rapid pace and the change that we see in today's society. And I had the fortune of being able to grow up through this transition, even in our society, from this idea of waterfall to this idea of what we call agility. And Agile is, without trying to get into a huge long training, Agile is more than just a replacement for waterfall. Agility is exactly what it sounds like. It's methods, it's ways of working, it's ways of thinking that help us be more responsive to that ever-moving change in society. So really quick question, how many of you guys out there are project managers? You work inside projects on a day-to-day basis, or you are someone who's in task management or that kind of role. How many of you guys out there are in there? Yeah, please let me know. Cool, so we got a couple of you guys out there. So yes, analytics and project manager. Yep. So maybe you can relate to where I was just talking about, is that we look at how our lives operate and we put ourselves into this sort of waterfall method of, I always have a plan. And then once I get my plan, I go into my requirements. And then once I get my requirements for whatever I'm working on, then I start to work on it. And then whenever I get that, I want to make sure that I get everything done before I let people know, or before I say that I'm done. And then once I do that, there's going to be things that I just need to fix or I need to maintain in that. Just think about how we build houses or bridges or roads, right? There's a lot of planning, and then we go out there and we figure out where we need to put things, and then we build the road or the house, and we have our plans and our whatever else, and then we move into this whole maintenance mode. And if some of you guys have a house like mine, and we're maintaining it now. So, but that's how we've really thought that life is. But what I started to realize is that there was a need for change. Everything changes. There's constant change in our lives. There's that big push towards let's move, let's do things differently. So I want to get into a little bit now. This is the meat. I gave you a bunch of stories. So let's get into a little meat. So what's going on? Well, the first thing, if you're project management, and if you're a project manager, then you're starting to see that the work is changing. That it's no longer, especially in IT, it's no longer that we do things for a very long time. That we drive out 3, 4, 5 year long projects because our customers can't consume that anymore. How many of you guys would love it if your favorite app got an update every 5 years? You wouldn't like that, would you? That would pretty much just suck pretty bad, right? And if it doesn't get updated every couple weeks, we're like, why? What's going on? Did they stop making the app? Is everything okay? Right? That we would wonder. And back in the day, we would say things like, well, that's cool for apps, but what about really important enterprise software? Or what about changing over to bigger servers or whatever else? And now what we're starting to see is even in the kind of work that we have, the types of things that are going on, people want to see fast change. Think of words like cloud. Cloud allows us to add or remove resources instantaneously. So the whole idea of the kind of work that we have is changing. And even the way that we do our work is changing. So I want to introduce you guys to something called red work, blue work today. How many of you guys have heard of this idea of red work, blue work? Anybody? Oh, it's going to be new. Sweet. So there's a gentleman, I have a little thing at the end of here that says, you guys need to read these books, or please go to these guys' websites. So this whole idea behind red work is that it's about reducing variability. Think the Industrial Revolution. Think that whole assembly line kind of thing. If you're a red work kind of person, then every day you come in and your job is to stamp rivets, right? That's what we do. It's a result of the Industrial Revolution. It's about doing, and it's about making sure that we avoid every possible error we can. Think about if you go to work and you say, well, I'm just coming to work to do my job, and you know exactly what your job is, then that's that legacy that's left behind about red work. However, most of our jobs, even some of the basic assembly line jobs, this whole idea of red work doesn't work anymore, because we're trying to figure out variability. We know that things don't come in exactly the same. So where our work used to be in the industrial age, this idea of, hey, even swapping out a keyboard or doing something that seems very tactical and tangible and just repetitive, it's not that way anymore. Everything we do has variability. The world is filled with variability. And so blue work embraces this idea. It's thinking. It's about thinking through everything you do, not just doing. It's about excellence. It's about making good decisions and not just executing on the tasks. And what we're seeing is that the majority of what we do every day is no longer this red work, or we just come in and do it, right? It's blue work. We have to think through it, to problem solve. And so if we have to problem solve, there's all these variables, it's really tough to build a Gantt chart around that. It's really tough to get a plan that's set in stone. And this is something that I had to learn. I can no longer just say, well, everybody's just going to do what I ask them to do, or just do what the job says. We need to be thinking through this. And so one of the things that's happening, and the idea behind agility is that this red work, blue work balance has shifted. I mean, we still have red work, right? I think sometimes emails are red work, blah, 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 send. Okay. But most of the work we do now is becoming blue work. And so the idea of building a plan and creating requirements and locking them down and having all this this rigor and this governance around how we do things, it becomes actually more problematic to getting the work done. And agility says there's better ways. Agility and Agile, the idea behind this Agile framework, or Scrum, if you've heard of Scrum, is to say that we want to shift that to be focused on what the outcomes are. And we want to make sure we give people a place where they can think through. We want to give them the ability to have variability. And yes, Lee, finding better ways to do things instead of it's always been done this way. That's one of my favorite lines, quotes, is the most dangerous phrase in most companies is it's always been done this way. So this idea of agility is switching to switching away from it's always been done this way, it's just a simple cookie cutter. It's shifting into thinking through what we have to do. Like I mentioned earlier, long time releases are gone. The idea that you're going to go away for 5 years and then come back, nobody wants that anymore, right? I also believe that this idea behind agility has shifted generationally. Our younger generations have gotten used to this instantaneous, this quick way, and there are new customers, there are new clients, and they want to see things happen, and they want to be involved in doing the work. They want to be involved. There's no longer just tell me what you want, and then I'll go away for 5 years and come back, or I'll go away for a year or 3 months even. They want regular feedback, and agility is about regular feedback, about having the client or having the person that's asking for the work and the person that's doing the work highly involved. And I think that this is a cyclical thing. I think the new generations are pushing for that. I think agility has changed that as well. The work, there's more accountability for value. It's no longer about just do the plan. They want to see value. And also, this is interesting because actually, Victor, you brought it up with the groups that you're working with and teaching in 6th through 12th grade. We work with a group out of Chicago called IC Stars. And it's very similar to what you guys are talking about. It takes those folks that may not have all the benefits of growing up in a high-tech location, and it teaches them skills in like a boot camp type of way. And they actually asked us to come in and do an agile workshop and to teach the kids and to teach the college students what agility and what agile is and how to work in that kind of way. And we're seeing that more and more. More people are coming out of college and high school even understanding what agility is, the ideas, the concepts behind this agile way of working. So it's being taught. So this is changing the work. And then more and more work is being viewed as acceptable for what we call agile frameworks. When I first started in all this, the only thing you used agile for was software. And that was only if it was a small piece of software and it needed to be released or it was brand new. Now we use agile and agile methods for a lot of work that has traditionally been not considered that way. Matter of fact, I was talking to a customer yesterday who wants to do what we call an ERP, which is a huge implementation. And they said, yeah, we really want to run that in an agile manner. They want to not have the guys go away for 2 years and then come back. They want to release small pieces of this functionality. They want to be highly involved. And so the type of work, and then speaking directly to UPMs, the type of work that we have going on is changing. It's being more acceptable. We're seeing agility used in infrastructure and operations, in analytics. It's widely used now in quite a bit of reporting, and it's becoming a normal kind of thing. And so the work is changing. So what? I just went on about things that are going on in my life and talked a little bit about the work changing. So what does this mean to you guys? What's changing for you? Well, if you ask any project manager, what you'll hear is that they focus on 3 things specifically the majority of the time. What do they focus on? Resources, schedule, and scope, right? We call that the iron triangle. We talk about those being the primary things that we focus on, because those are the areas that can impact or can cause issues in a project, or we live and die by those things. Those are what makes us successful or what helps us to crash. But Agile's changing how we focus on the job of project manager. Let's take a couple examples from resources. Because agility says, let's have more expectation from our team members to get the jobs done, to self-organize, the idea that they come together, to self-manage, to focus on what it takes to get to done, rather than focus on building the plan and all of that. Because there's more focus now on soft skills. How many of you guys remember when the only thing anybody cared about was, are you going to come in? Are you going to do your job? Are you going to leave? And are you going to just do a great job? That's all anybody cared about. They didn't care about if you were a nice person, or if you were collaborative, or if you were able to be, sensitive to other people's needs, if you were able to communicate well. It was just about, can you do your job? That's what really mattered. And that was huge back in the 80s and the 90s, especially if you were in software development. We jokingly said that we kept all of our developers in the basement, right? And they were in their little, no fluorescent lights in their cubes, just coding away, right? But we can't have that anymore. If you're going to be successful as a team member, then you're going to need to be highly collaborative. You're going to have to know how to communicate. You can be an introvert, and that's awesome, but you're also going to have to come out and be able to talk through problems and work side by side with people. And in a lot of cases of companies that adopt agility before COVID, you were even sitting at the same table with people all day long. And so as a project manager, the way that you approach your teams are going to have to change. It is changed. You no longer have to make sure that everybody's there. Make sure that you're keeping everybody focused. You're not having to make sure that all the requirements are being met, because that's the job of the team. So the resources, as we used to call them, have taken over the main components of what we did as a project manager. Oh, that's not good. Well, let's talk about schedule, right? Schedules are becoming shorter. I don't have to think about having this 2 and 3 year plan. I may have some items that go out that far, but I don't have to live constrained to that, because in Agile, in most forms of agility, I'm looking at a couple weeks away. And so I'm looking at work that gets us to that point. So the need to do long-term project planning is becoming diminished because we're not doing what we call big upfront planning. I'm not needing to worry about, am I going to be able to achieve that? I get to replan those things as I get closer. So the whole idea of keeping a schedule and watching it closely, the project manager is not having to do that anymore. They're not having to be so focused on schedule because, again, the team cares about the schedule. And then finally, scope. At the end of the day, we're having more people that are customers and business people wanting to get involved and own the work that we're doing and be responsible for helping with that. And so the project managers, we're seeing them have to change and shift. They're not watching the resources anymore, and they're not having to get heavy into schedule, and they have other people that are doing the scope. And so what we're seeing is that less organizations, especially consulting organizations, are being asked to provide project management oversight like we used to be. Or when we have challenges, I have a company that we know very well that when COVID hit, they had to cut quite a bit of their contractors. And many of the contractors they cut first were project managers, because they're saying, hey guys, we have these resources. They know, the teams know how to do the work. They're watching the schedule. We have business people involved with the scope. So you start to ask yourself, what am I going to do? So I'm not going to talk through this whole slide, guys. And matter of fact, I'm going to send you this. I put this together about a year ago, and this was a last minute insert. But as I started thinking through this presentation, I probably could have just sent you this and been done. But as a project manager, you have some options here. And I'm not saying that you're going to just become a scrum master or a product owner or some other kind of thing, but the mentalities that we're going to be changing are going to be imperative. Are we going to become a servant leader for our teams? What does that look like? Am I removing impediments? Am I educating myself and the team and the stakeholders? Am I a team player? Am I helping them meet their goals? Am I reminding them of their constraints, but not forcing them to do all these things? Am I encouraging the team? Am I protecting the team from those very micromanagers? So Deborah, was it you? I think it was you that said, how do you, with a detailed plan? So yeah, you're actually protecting the team from people that used to be like yourself as a servant leader for that team. And you're encouraging higher flow, which means are you encouraging people to look at ways to remove waste, to remove challenges so they can go faster? So that's one way you can go. Another way you can go is product support. Now this looks like a bunch of different things. This could be, so Kevin, good question. I'm showing that in my case, and an option is that if you feel like that those questions are something that you want to explore and that's who you want to be, then you could move into that kind of role. But I know a lot of folks that are servant leaders and they're still project managers. It's just changing the job. It's changing the way we look at things. And so it's just, these are different areas of focus that you could ask yourself. So the second one is that product level support. Some of you guys that are project managers, you're really good and you really like to be involved with helping define scope and helping to see what the solutions are, and you're solution oriented kind of people. And so if you want to move into product support, am I involved in this with the stakeholders? Am I engaged at the request of the team? Am I handling the tasks of organizational management so that the team can deliver? Am I reminding the organization the differences between agile and traditional artifacts to keep things lean? Am I assisting the product owner? Am I being that product owner that helps define and build a deep backlog? And it says C below. I'll send you guys the note on that one. And am I encouraging procurement and communication and risk and stakeholder management? Am I going through those kind of things? I'm less focused. That I may be somebody who's more focused, a project manager that's more focused on production support, or not production support, I'm sorry, product support, like product management, product leadership. But what is going away is driving the team, is managing to a plan, is getting involved in that human resources management piece, and then forcing the team to commit to deliver. So those things are moving away because we're seeing agility in this idea of agile infiltrate into even the project management role. Some of you guys that are project managers may get into that whole product support side of things. You might become a product owner. You may become somebody who supports a product owner. Some of you may become a scrum master. That's the road that I went down. I will tell you that it was tough because every day there are things that I sometimes have to fight in doing because the job no longer requires that. It requires these kind of approaches. And then finally, it's changing the person. Now, I want to be clear about this one because I'm not saying in this slide that the things on the left are bad and the things on the right are good. I'm also not saying that everybody's either on the left or on the right, or that project managers are on the left and all the good agile people are on the right. I'm not even saying that. I think most people are on some sort of continuum along this. I know I still am in a lot of these areas, but this is what we see changing, and I'll walk through these. On one side, it's taking all the project responsibility. For a long time, that's what I did. I'm responsible for the project. It lives or dies, fails or succeeds based on my back. But what I needed to learn was to give responsibility and empower the team members and the other people, because they're the ones doing the work. Love solutions. You're probably thinking, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you want to love solutions? What we find is that when we fall in love with a solution, it can be very difficult to see the problem in another way. And so we get locked into, this is the way it has to be. There was a number of times with one of the companies I worked for that, one time specifically, we got fined because we fell in love with a solution and we forgot that there were other things going on. And so instead of looking at what the problem was and coming up with multiple solutions that could meet the needs, we fell in love with this one solution. It caused us a lot of heartache. So it's changing from loving solutions to loving the problem. What is the problem that I'm trying to solve? This one, hold people accountable for their errors. It is important to make sure that we have high quality, but if we're always holding people accountable for their errors, we're not giving them a place to fail fast and to fix fast. We should be holding people accountable for their abilities. This one hit me, matter of fact, the other day, is I had a talk with somebody I was working with, and I started talking to them about, man, we didn't do this right. And I watched their demeanor. You ever talk to somebody and you have to give them feedback and you sort of watch them just start crouching down in the chair? And you're like, oh no. And I had to say, I noticed this, and I turned it and I said, you know why? Because you are better than that. This is who you are. These are what your abilities are. You're a phenomenal coach who's capable of doing these things. And I've seen you in action. I know you're doing this. So I know that wasn't you. It's just a mess up. Let's move on. And it changed it. They still knew they made a mistake, but I was holding them accountable for what their abilities were. And so moving, agility is really moving people from this where, hey, you did a wrong thing. What's wrong? What's going on? And what I said earlier about it being more of a cultural shift, we're starting to see that. And so we're holding people accountable for their abilities. The legacy ways demand self-knowledge. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that you are the one, you have to know it all. And you have to be the smartest person on the project. But in reality, we're always learning. We're always learning new things, and it's okay to defer to others. A project mindset versus a solution and product mindset. Projects are awesome. It's good because it gives us a start and a stop, but that gives us a very short window to think in. So start being a solution and a product mindset kind of person. Start looking at what are the solutions long term that I can go into, rather than just looking at this small piece. The coaching, yes, makes associates want to work harder and be great. That's right, Tamara. Is that going back up to that one? There's a way. Matter of fact, when we do these part of our coaching engagement where we go in and do an assessment up front, we used to really lay out for the companies what they're doing wrong. And it wasn't until I realized that it takes less energy to move somebody from a place where they're maybe not doing that well to moving to a place where they're high performing. And it's a whole lot easier to do that by accentuating the things they're doing right. And when you put a lot of energy behind that, then it's easier for them to grasp hold of those things they're doing right, and all those things they're doing wrong seem to fall by the wayside. And this is what, again, going back to this whole point, again, not saying this is project manager on the left and some agile role on the right, but just the kind of person that we're being required to be now is changing. It's changing that role of project manager. Decision maker versus question asker. It's in the end of this, but there's a book called Humble Inquiry. I highly recommend it. It's sort of a tricky book because it starts out with saying, hey, I'm going to teach you how to ask better questions. And then what you realize is that to ask better questions, you actually have to want to know the answer from that person. And so one thing that's can be difficult when you're transitioning from being somebody who is a decision maker to somebody who's a question asker is with decision maker, it's very clean, isn't it? I go and I make a decision, we're done. But that eliminates variability. We don't want to eliminate variability. We want to embrace variability. And so we can ask questions to help get people to making a decision, a determination on their own. So instead of saying something, making a decision around a technology or making a decision around a date or whatever else, and just going in and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Asking questions builds that relationship and lets you understand and lets that other person understand where you're coming from too. So instead of saying, hey guys, we have a drop dead date. It's October 15th. We got to get it done by October 15th. Done, no question. We can start to ask questions. Hey there, everyone. Just a quick question. Does everybody understand? Does everybody know that we have a client that has some challenges and they need a solution? Guys, what do you think we can do for them? How fast do you think we can get this done? Or what's the timeline? And when we start getting dates, well, we can have that to them by November 15th. Well, why is it November 15th? Well, I got to do this big thing and this big thing and this big thing. It's like, well, what if we didn't do all of that? What are some ways that we can cut that back? So we're putting the responsibility in the hands of the people who are asking the questions. It's going to take longer, but it's going to bring them into the fold. In agility, I'm going to speed up a little bit. Sorry, guys. We move from what we call leading followers to leading leaders. In agility, everybody is a leader. Everybody has been asked to step up. You're leading yourself. You're leading your own work. You're responsible, highly responsible for the work that you do, or you could be responsible for the team as a team member. And so in that case, I'm not just giving people work to do, I'm giving people opportunities to lead. And so as a project manager, moving from that legacy mindset into an agile type mindset, we're looking at leading leaders. Providing directions or direction. Hey guys, you really need to do X, Y, and Z, to providing help. Asking people if they need your help, assistance, rather than just giving them that without really asking. Drives versus navigates. It's okay. I will tell you guys, I'm not a fan of being in the passenger seat for no other reason, but I'm still fighting that whole part of me. But at the end of the day, I found it so much fun in work to even help people navigate and let them really drive where we're going in a lot of ways. I get to ask questions. I get to provide help. I get to be more of a solution mindset, and it helps me to help them figure out where we're all going. Do you see constraints or do you see no limits? And then finally, this idea of, as a project manager, we're always looking to converge on a single point. I need to get a task done. Getting tasks done allow us to meet deadlines. Getting deadlines done allows us to meet the project deadline. Ultimately, it allows us to meet the release point and allows us to meet the customer. Whereas in this other kind of mindset that we need to start embracing, it looks like diverging. So we start to ask questions we start to look at other solutions. Do we really need to complete this task to get this timeline done? Is that really important for us? Is there something else that's more important that we need to look at? And so the idea of always coming to a point, always coming to this task kind of convergence, instead of looking at, hey, what is out there that we really need to get done, and is there more important work? So again, I know this is a little different tonight. I know that we didn't really do an introduction to agility, which looking back was probably not a good thing. I probably should have done that for you guys. But for those of you who are on that are a project manager that have lived in this project world, I hope that you can see where things are changing. We're moving from this project-based kind of thought, and agility is changing the way that we view the role of a project manager. And in some ways, it's changing who we are. In some ways, the work is changing. And in some ways, the job function is changing. But I will tell you that that it has been a big shift in my life around even who I am and how I approach work and my family. So yeah, if there are any other additional questions, I'd love to hear them. I hope this was helpful for somebody. I will send out these resources to you guys along with the notes that I had if anybody really wants them. But these are 3 books that I really recommend. The first one is Turn the Ship Around, which is by a gentleman named David Marquet. He introduces the whole idea of red work, blue work that I talked about earlier, and probably gives a much better description of it. Humble Inquiry is another book, The Gentle Art of Asking Instead of Telling. Actually, Edgar Schein has another book called Humble Consulting, which is phenomenal as well. And then a final one by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. That is a tremendous, oh, sorry guys. That is a tremendous book. And I just killed the screen sharing. Sorry about that. So I know that was a lot. Yeah, Jason, it is a phenomenal one. I'm going to go through this. If you guys have any other questions, I'm going to hang out for a while too. So if you have anything you want to ask, I really want to open it up to if there's direct questions around what you do and how that's going to be impacted by agility. If you guys want to see, I can send you some materials on what Agile means and whatever else about that. But as far as Stacy opinion of PMI ACP, I will tell you that I go on a roller coaster about certifications. Sometimes I'm like, I love certs, they're the best thing. And then 2 years later, I'm like, certs are terrible. And I'm sort of in a halfway point right now. So I feel like I can be a little more level about it. I think the PMI ACP is a great introduction to agility. One of the challenges that I've seen with some of the companies like Six Sigma certifications and some of the PMI certifications is there's an idea that once I get my PMP, I get the PMI ACP, that man, I'm there. And one thing I want to let you guys, and Jennifer's shaking her head, she knows, this is the beginning. The PMP really tests you on what you've done. And it's really good to establish credibility that says, hey, I've done this many hours. I've learned this. I know how to run a waterfall project. I'm very good at that. PMI ACP, the certified Scrum Master or professional Scrum Master from Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org respectively, they are just getting started. You're going to have to learn agility by doing it, by living it, by learning it, by getting mentored. And it's just one of those things. So I encourage them from a learning standpoint, we should always be learning. But they're just a starting point for you guys. Yep. Smita, that's a great EduScrum USA, great start. Let's see. Yeah, the red work, blue work stuff. Yeah, let me know if there's anything else I can do for you guys. Like I said, I hope this was helpful tonight. So just let me know what else you guys need.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Joshua. Great talk. Again, I'm so excited that we're able to partner back up with Matrix and bring our members and guests opportunities like this to learn from those in industry, especially dealing with a discipline that's pretty prominent in the corporate world, but I think it's something that could be utilized no matter what you're doing, whether it's academia, you're a student, or if you're at home. Maybe you can encourage your children or